Welcome everybody to the Sweet Spot Global Leadership Summit, where are going to be talking all week about how organizations and their leaders can thrive from the inside out. And I'm super excited to be sharing and introducing to you the lovely Ame-Lia Tamburrini. Welcome, Ame-Lia. So great that you're here today.
Oh, thanks so much, Sarah. It's so great to be here with you and be part of the summit again. I love what you're up to in the world, and I'm glad I can be here to support you.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I'm excited that you're back again for round 2 of the summit and to really talk about this whole aspect of communication, because I think it's crucial to thriving and to both personally, but also for organizations as well. So I'll just introduce you and then we can get into your amazing topic of communication mastery. So Ame-Lia is the podcast host of Circle of Change and the CEO of Hum Consulting. That's an organization that she's built that creates safety across organizations and communities so that you can have conversations that move leaders and the world forward, which I think is just totally amazing and similar mission to what I have as well. And the dialogues and communication that Ame-Lia creates are dialogues that help people of all types be seen and heard, which I believe is so important, especially now as we're looking to expand diversity and work in this online virtual kind of environment more and more. So welcome, Ame-Lia. I'd love to hear today your comments and your perspective on how leaders in their organizations can thrive through communication mastery.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll start just by sharing, why this topic is so important to me. My vision is that I see communication as this outward projection of what is going on for us in the world. And we're either projecting fear or love with that communication. And with all the divisiveness in the world, I really want to support people to show up in love so that we can create connection as much as possible, because we so need that right now.
Absolutely. And I love that you're kind of making it fear or love. And I agree with you. It can be that clear. I mean, there's a lot of, complexity underneath that, but really understanding, how we respond in fear and compared to how we respond when we're at a peaceful state, is
Yes.
crucial. So I'd love to hear more about that, but I'd like to know first, maybe why communication is so important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It starts with my own personal story, of course. When I was young, my family household, there was a lot of division in that household. And there was also the message that as a girl, it was better to be seen than heard. And through those experiences, I really bought into this story that using my voice would only lead to bad things. Because of that, I really didn't learn the skills to communicate well. I kept silent a lot of the time. So I didn't know how to articulate my needs. When there was tension present in conversations, it terrified me. And I would show up in these weird ways, as we do as humans. Like I'd either get really angry and yell, or I would leave. I'd check out. And I had a kind of an awakening at some point that, wow, this was not a sustainable way to live. And I also didn't have really good connection in my work relationships and my personal relationships. And it was a very painful and lonely place to be. And so when I was in that depth of that pain, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something about this, because I wanted connection. I knew that. And so I started to learn the skills and really understand what was underneath all of that. And when I did that work, well, it's been really life-changing. I feel like I have so much freedom in how it is that I show up in the world, and my relationships are just so much deeper. And that is what I want for everybody, because I know I'm not the only one that didn't learn these skills of communication. So that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do.
Yeah, well, I think it's crucial. And I went on a similar journey of being young and not aware of my needs and desires, partially not being able to kind of be aware of what it was that was important to me, let alone communicating it. And then, you know, in a leadership environment, that of course reflected in my leadership abilities. But I also found what you're describing is kind of that, as that self-awareness piece came on, and kind of learning how to communicate better, and gradually becoming more authentic, that
Yes.
really transformed the relationships that I've had. And like you're saying, that sort of self-fulfillment as well, because you're actually genuinely connecting, instead of what I used to be, which was more of like, I was professional on the outside and very polished, but that was it. And I remember a colleague of mine saying, you know, Sarah, you need to let people in. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that, right? Because I had built those walls for a reason in the first place. So it's been an interesting journey for me personally. So I would definitely love to hear your tips about how you have really found that essential kind of self-awareness piece has been a building block in leadership. And I guess I'm wondering if you can tell us more about that, and how those two pieces kind of go together like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think fundamentally, I believe that leadership is about communication, both how we communicate with ourselves and how we communicate with others. And in today's world, where there is so much disruption, and both in our organizations and our communities, like the Great Resignation is a perfect example of that disruption, where people really want more from work. They want something different. They want it to be meaningful. They want it to be impactful. They want to feel like they're making a difference. And in order for leaders to really thrive in that space, they need to listen to and really hear the needs of the people that they're serving, the people in their organizations as well. And I think often we don't think of listening as a communication skill. We're often thinking about what's coming out of our mouth, but listening is essential. And where the self-awareness piece comes in is that when these triggers come up, and they come up in all of us, we get angry, we get defensive, we get protective, we stop listening effectively as well, because we start interpreting all these words through this filter. And I think what is required today of leaders is really having that ability to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to really help people stand on their own and lift them up. And to do that, we sort of need to listen a little bit more cleanly. And when we have awareness about why it is that we might have gone into a protective mode, we can relax in those moments and really just take the words in.
Yes, I think that's so important. And I'm wondering, maybe we can kind of expand on that a little bit. So if a leader is in some sort of reactive mode, then of course that's going to have a negative impact on their ability to receive, like you said, and to listen. But how can that person kind of work on, if you're in reactive mode, how can you kind of, I guess, move out of it? You're describing maybe the self-awareness piece as the key. Is that what you're, I guess, suggesting here, or are there other sort of strategies you would recommend?
Yeah, self-awareness is key. And part of that is recognizing why it is we're showing up the way we are. And so when we get into those protective modes, that is fundamentally our survival mechanism that is kicking in. It's a very natural response. So that means that we're either in fight, so we're argumentative, we're defensive, we've sort of got like our boxing gloves on, or we're in flight mode. So that means we're sort of checked out of the conversation, not paying attention, or maybe we actually physically leave the room. There's also the freeze response, where our mind goes blank. Like it is impossible in that moment to really hear anything, to find words. And then there's this relatively new reaction in the world of psychology called fawning. And that's when we get overly apologetic or very submissive in these conversations.
Interesting. Can you say more about that before we kind of, because that is a new one for me. I'm familiar with the other three, but the fawning response, that's one of my go-tos.
Is it? Yeah.
It is. So
Yeah.
I feel very, very seen here. But I'm wondering if you can kind of talk a little bit more about that, just because that it's good, I think, to be able to recognize that as a fear response. That really gives me some good self-awareness just from hearing that.
Absolutely. I think that overly apologetic or very submissive or yes, of course, anything, I'll do anything. It's sort of like that need to be liked in the extreme where we're saying to ourselves in that moment, if I am not liked in this moment, if I don't do what this person says, like I'm in danger. And so it's really just an exacerbation of that need to be liked, which I think a lot of us carry within us as well.
I appreciate you expanding on that, just so that I think maybe like others, the people that are listening are familiar with the fight, the flight, the freeze. I think that was a good example as well, as where you're just kind of there's nothing.
That's my go-to.
Interesting. So wondering if you can tell us more about what that might look like. So the mind drawing a blank, any other sort of signs that might be going on.
Mind going blank for me, and this is something that happens to me a lot. I literally cannot move from the place. For me, what happens is that I can no longer hear what is being said in that moment. I'm physically unable to move, and there's no words that are coming to me either. It's just like this impossibility of, I literally just feel frozen. I think freeze is such a good descriptive word for what is going on.
So if somebody's in that moment, I wonder if you can share your wisdom around that. How do you shift out of this fear response, whether, if it's any of one of those four that you've described?
Absolutely. So I think we need to recognize in this moment that this is a trauma response. And trauma, the way I view trauma is really there's a wound that has occurred. Generally, this happens in our childhood. It could be a sentence that suddenly reacts to us, that we react to in a way that we feel we need to protect ourselves, or it can be obviously much greater than that. But that when that trauma response kicks in, we need to calm our nervous system to get us back into the present moment. And so what I personally like to do is like literally put my hand on my heart. And this has been shown to work.
Okay.
And I take a deep breath in through the belly and in through the nose. It's a very expansive breath. And then I just say to myself, it's okay, Ame-Lia, it's okay. You're safe. Because generally in that moment, our bodies have said we're not safe. And if it is true, in fact, that we are safe, if it's just an exchange of words, for example, we just need to remind ourselves that it's okay, calm down. And often that can be enough to reconnect to the present moment again and settle in and really hear what's happening. Or maybe in that moment, you just need to say, you know what, I think I'm a bit triggered right now and I need to take a walk or do what you need to do, but you come back to that present moment and really take care of yourself.
That's beautiful, and a great takeaway for everybody listening, to really have that tangible, example of, just putting your hand over your heart, taking a deep breath. So I guess that's a really nice lead in to, in conflict, how do we then kind of work in that? So that you're describing that sort of when we're triggered. So how do we, I guess, stand in that tension and conflict and continue to stay grounded and connected?
I think constantly coming back to self-awareness. So keep checking in with yourself. And the more that's a practice that happens over maybe a lifetime to really hone and master that skill. But I think what's required as well is there's an ability to let go of control in any moment. And when we're thinking about big solutions like the Great Resignation and systemic racism and reconciliation, there is a need to really create spaces.
So in the moment here, we've kind of, wanting to stay present in tension or conflict. And, there's these big themes going on that you're describing of the
Mm,
great resignation, reconciliation, all of these kind of big, big global or national things. But how do we stay present and connected in either that big tension or maybe even in that kind of more in the moment, in that immediate conversation sort of scenario?
mm. Yeah, well, thank you for
No
bringing us
problem.
back. I think that there's a need to also recognize, I mean, beyond what I've just said, which I think is fairly essential to just really find the ways to calm yourself, is
Mhm.
to find your supports. And also, when I think about what's happening in the world right now, this great transition that we're in from really going from unconscious leadership to conscious leadership, it's that
Mhm.
recognition that we as leaders are not alone. And actually, the more that we create spaces in our workplaces, in our communities, where we can sort of distribute the leadership and recognize that everybody has a role to play in this situation,
Mhm. Mhm.
the easier it's going to for us to be to just really show up as human beings, to show up in a space and acknowledge that, you know what, I'm feeling triggered in this moment, and know that there are other people around you to um, to support you, and that are
Mm.
also not going
Okay.
to react to that. So it's really about shifting your environment so that people can start to have different conversations and really show up as themselves.
Yeah, I think that's crucial here. So I'm wondering if we can maybe unpack it a little bit before we kind of close out the
Mhm.
conversation. Is really that what I'm hearing you describe is sort of that authentic communication within your team. Instead of that sort of old fashioned, what I used to try to do, being this perfect, I would wear my suit and I was, polished and very, professional, to instead of kind of saying, I'm feeling a little off today, or whatever that is, and recognizing that we don't have to have it perfect, and we don't have
Mhm.
to have all the answers. And like you said, this empowering everybody to sort of help create this new conscious leadership piece that you're describing, which I love, by the way. Is one of my missions as well. And part
Yeah.
of what I think is so great that we can have authentic conversations about this exact topic, that how can we be in discomfort? How can we be in this place of unknowing in some areas, and still show up in authentic ways. So I really am appreciating this conversation we're having, Ame-Lia, and I'm sure we could talk for hours on this. Maybe we'll have to do another event specifically on communication.
Mm.
But I guess as we're looking to close out our conversation here, you've already talked about this transformative period in human development, and really kind of how leaders can transform how they're being. I'm just wondering if you have any kind of final thoughts on that, just for people to take away from today's conversation.
Yeah. I think that that ability to let go of control, there's a recognition there that that's sort of a conditioning of an old way of being, that
Mm-hmm.
and I say that so that if you are in that position and you feel that need to have control and feel very intimidated by the concept of letting it go and really sharing the responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
that that is not your fault, that it is how we have been taught in terms of how to be. We've learned that through our families, through our social structures, through the leadership that we see. And so just to settle into that and say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
learning journey, and I'm just going to take one step at a time, and um, and really get clear. I think what helps in this transition is really get clear about what you're committed to in the world, and
Mm-hmm.
have that trickle into everything that you do, and let it guide you, let it give you that strength when you start to waver, when things get tough, that you come back to that commitment and say, you know what, this is important to me. It's important that I do this work, because self-awareness isn't easy work. It's really courageous work.
That's very true. It's hard. I think
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing to kind of look at ourselves, especially if there are things going on that we're not that happy with. But that empowered state is where then we can start to behave in more intentional ways, and we can look at empowering our teams and ourselves really as we're moving forward. And well, I think we could talk about this all day. I really appreciate what you're sharing with us today, is being that self-aware person, recognizing what's going on in the moment, so you can kind of get back to that present state, and then really being okay with the fact that this is a lifelong journey. Communication and self-awareness is not, check, I'm done. So I really appreciate that. So I guess if anybody wants to find out more about working with you, or I think you have a kind of a fun freebie that you'd like to share, I'm wondering if you can tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. People can find me on my website, consulting.ca, and there you'll find all sorts of information, and information as well on my podcast, The Circle of Change, which is a supportive environment for people to hear stories of other people who are on this journey as well of leadership in this new world. So I highly recommend checking that out. On my website, and we'll give you the link as well, that will take you directly there. There is the guide, guide that is all about how to go from conflict to connection in your communication. So fabulous. There's three essential skills that we tap into in there, and it's juicy and hopefully supportive for you as you go forward.
Thank you. I think that's a really nice add-on to what we've discussed today to really kind of take things to the next step. So thank you, Ame-Lia, for sharing today. I'm inspired. I'm taking away some great reminders, and also that fawn response was a good learning for me today. So I appreciate you bringing your wisdom and your knowledge together and inspiring all the leaders that are listening today with your perspective on communication mastery. So thank you, Ame-Lia, for being here. And I'm sure everybody's going to love exploring more of your information on your website that, like you said, I'll link below. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.